The party was in full swing. Music pulsed, laughter echoed, and the air vibrated with energy. John and David, friends since childhood, stood by the snack table, their laughter blending with the merriment. They were tipsy, their heads giddy with the night's revelry. Midnight arrived, announced by a chorus of cheers and the clinking of glasses. John checked his watch, a worried frown creasing his brow. "We should get going," he said, his voice barely audible above the din. David, engrossed in a conversation, merely nodded. They said their goodbyes, their words swallowed by the festive clamour. Outside, the cool night air hit them like a splash of cold water. John shivered, suddenly aware of the late hour and the long drive ahead. David, still humming a tune from the party, seemed unfazed. He tossed John the car keys. "You drive," David said, his words slightly slurred. John caught the keys and with a sigh led the way to the car. He knew the drive home would be long, especially at this hour. Little did he know, it would be a journey he would never forget. John started the engine, the familiar purr a comforting sound in the stillness of the night. As he pulled out of the driveway, he glanced at the dashboard clock. 12:15 a.m. He sighed. It was going to be a long drive back. John knew two routes, the long, well-lit highway or the shortcut. The shortcut was a narrow, winding road that sliced through the heart of Black Ridge Forest, a place steeped in unsettling local lore. It was said to be haunted, a claim fueled by whispered tales and strange occurrences. "Let's take the shortcut," David said suddenly, breaking the silence. John frowned. "You know they say it's haunted, right?" he asked, his voice laced with apprehension. David scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "Just silly stories," he said. "Besides, it's much faster." John hesitated, torn between his better judgment and his desire to get home quickly. He glanced at David, his friend's face a mask of carefree confidence. Against his better judgment, he steered the car towards the ominous silhouette of Black Ridge Forest. As they left the main road and entered the forest, the atmosphere changed. The cheery glow of streetlights gave way to an oppressive darkness, broken only by the car's headlights. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Unease coiled in the pit of John's stomach. He couldn't shake off the feeling that they were entering a forbidden place. The further they drove into the forest, the denser the darkness became. The car's headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating towering trees that reached out like skeletal fingers, their branches, gnarled and twisted, intertwined overhead, forming a canopy so thick that it blotted out the moon and stars. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the hum of the engine and the occasional rustle of leaves. John gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white in the dim glow of the dashboard. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest. "It's creepy, isn't it?" David said, his voice subdued for the first time since they left the party. John merely nodded, unable to trust his voice. He wished he had insisted on taking the longer route. The air inside the car felt heavy, as though a weight had settled upon them. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist at the edge of the headlight's reach, taking on menacing shapes. John found himself holding his breath, his senses on high alert. He thought he heard whispers carried on the wind, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the heart of the forest itself. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just the wind playing tricks on his mind. But deep down, a primal fear began to take root. He was no longer sure if he was imagining the faint scent of decay that now permeated the air, or the fleeting glimpses of movement in the rearview mirror. Suddenly the car lurched violently, the engine sputtering and coughing before falling silent. The headlights flickered and died, plunging them into an absolute darkness that was almost tangible. "What was that?" David exclaimed, his voice sharp with alarm. John, his heart pounding, tried the ignition. Nothing. He tried again, but the engine refused to cooperate. "Damn it," he muttered, feeling a surge of panic. They were stranded, alone in the heart of the haunted forest. "What do we do now?" David asked, his bravado gone. John took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "We need to check the engine," he said, his voice tight. "Maybe it's something simple." He stepped out of the car into the oppressive darkness. The air was heavy with moisture, and the scent of decay was stronger now, making his stomach churn. "I'm thirsty," David complained from inside the car. "See if there's any water in the trunk." John walked to the back of the car and opened the trunk. Empty except for a spare tire and a jack. He closed it with a bang, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. "No luck," he said. turning back towards the front of the car. "I'll see if I can find a stream or something." David started to protest, but John was already disappearing into the darkness. John's footsteps faded into the distance, leaving David alone in the car. The silence pressed in on him, suffocating and absolute. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sounded unnaturally loud, amplified by his fear. He found himself holding his breath, listening intently, his heart pounding in his chest. He wished John would return, his presence a reassuring beacon in the overwhelming darkness. He glanced nervously at the back seat, half expecting to see a pair of eyes glinting at him from the shadows. He chided himself for his fear, telling himself it was just the isolation and the stories playing tricks on his mind. But then he heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible, coming from the back seat. His name, David. His blood ran cold. He whipped around, his eyes straining to penetrate the darkness. There was nothing there. He tried to rationalize it, to convince himself it was just his imagination, but deep down he knew he wasn't alone. David. The whisper came again, closer this time, laced with an icy chill that sent shivers down his spine. He could feel a presence behind him, cold and menacing. Terror gripped him, paralyzing him in his seat. John returned to the car, a sense of unease clinging to him after the oppressive silence of the forest. He called out to David, but there was no answer. He approached the car cautiously, his unease growing with every step. As he peered through the window, his blood ran cold. David was frozen in his seat, his eyes wide with terror, staring at the back seat. His face was contorted in a silent scream. John's breath caught in his throat. Something was terribly wrong. He yanked open the car door and shook David's shoulder, but his friend was unresponsive. The car suddenly lurched forward as if possessed, the engine roaring back to life with a deafening roar. The car accelerated, careening down the narrow road, John's screams swallowed by the sound of crunching metal and shattering glass. The next morning, the wreckage of the car was discovered at the bottom of a ravine, the mangled metal a testament to the horrors of the night before. The shortcut through Blackridge Forest was permanently closed, deemed too dangerous for passage. Locals whispered that the forest had claimed 2 more victims, their souls forever bound to the haunted stretch of road. The tale of the haunted shortcut became a chilling legend, a stark reminder of the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the ordinary, waiting to claim those who dared to tempt fate.